The purpose of this video is to learn about event handling, to learn about delegates, how to use the built-in event handler, how to handle controls component events, how to handle mouse and keyboard events, and how to manage multiple controls. We've talked about this thing in the background called a listener, and a listener is just simply a section of code that's running that is responsible for listening for events to occur. An event is just simply something that the system thinks is interesting. So things like a mouse click or moving a mouse or pressing a key on the keyboard. And whenever we cause one of these events to occur, we say that it's raised or triggered or fired. So what we're going to do is we're going to fire or trigger an event when we click on something. We're going to raise an event when we use a section of code to pretend that something happened. But behind the scenes, what we have is this thing called an event handler. It's just simply whatever method is supposed to run when that event occurs. You've played with these every time you've created a button. When we double click on things, the default event handler gets created. So an event handler, we can use ones that are not the built-in ones. So we can double click on something and it knows that if we click on a button or if we select a radio button or something like that, it knows what the default one is. We can actually create our own, and the way that we name these is typically going to be whatever the name of the object is. So if it's a button, then we'll do something like cmd calculate underscore click. And so whatever the object name is goes first, underscore, and then what the event is. So if I wanted something like if you press a key and the button is selected at the same time, then we could have something like cmd button underscore key press or something like that. But what we're waiting for is the event handler, which is also known as an event receiver, to do something. Now the question is, how does it know what occurred? And there's this thing called a sender, which is just simply going to be the control that actually generated the event. Now in our code, we end up with something like this where we have the button here was called change button. Somebody clicked on it and the object that was interacted with becomes the sender. So we create an object that tells the system who the sender was. Then we're going to take the event that occurred and we'll actually create an arguments list for it. And what that allows us to do is things like here it says e.toString. We can actually state what the event was that occurred and display it as a string. So we can actually show on the screen you clicked on something. So we have arguments. They're responsible for stating what actually occurred. And then the click event here is just going to be what the method was that was generated when we double clicked on the button. We're going to use the built-in event handlers, but we can use different ones that are built into the system. And so I can have things like we click the button, or we hover over something, or we move the mouse, or we press a key on the keyboard. And we're going to have an event handler, which is just simply going to be what happens when I actually perform one of those events. These types of events that are built in, we don't have to specify any additional code. The system just automatically knows which event occurred, and therefore it will perform whatever code we specify for it. We just have to tell it which section of code should happen for which type of event. Alright, so there are a bunch of these controls that are already built in, and depending on what the object type is, it will dictate what we can actually do. So we can do things like if we have a form or a section on our form that we change the background color, we can cause an event to occur. If we click, if we add a new control, if we remove a control, if we drag and drop something, if we enter a field, if we exit a field, if we press the enter key, if we change the foreground color, any of these are considered to be events that can occur. So I can take the outcome of one event and cause another event to occur from it. Alright, so if you notice here, we also have things like you could press keys. So if you push a key down, if you let go of a key, those are two separate senders that could occur. Alright, if we leave a field, if we lose focus, which means that if I had a section of text that was selected and then we deselect it, that loses focus. If something else becomes in focus, then we can cause it to happen. If you click the mouse button and hold the button, will it do something? If you let go of the mouse button, if the mouse moves into a certain spot, we can move the wheel on the mouse. We can move things around if we resize something on the screen. If we change visibility of something, these are all different types of senders that can have events that can occur. Alright, so what we know is that we've already used a bunch of these in our different programs. We just simply double clicked on them. But if I want different ones to run, then we have to specify how to do it through the events window, and that's the one with the little lightning bolt. Alright, so the code is going to be exactly like whatever we've created before. It's just a question of what is the name of the method that runs when this particular event occurs, and then we have to tell it in the events window what method to actually run. Alright, so we have mouse events, and we can do things like if you click on something, move the mouse, if we drag something, and these all fall under an object called mouse event arg. So we have the mouse event handler is built in and will actually handle all these different events that can occur with the mouse. We don't have to write the code for it, we just simply let the system do it. Alright, so we can do things like clicking the mouse. If we double click, we enter, move, have a whole bunch of different events, but we can also look at where the mouse is on the screen. So if the mouse moves to a specific location on the screen, then we can cause an event to occur. If we want to, we can also look at where is the mouse, and our code can actually be displaying where exactly the mouse exists on the screen. We have key events. These are things going to be from the keyboard. This is going to be if you press the key or even if you release the key, it can cause things to occur. Once again, we have a handler built into it, so it's called a key press event handler. And we also have a key event handler, and the two of these will handle if you pressed a key or let go of a key or so forth. Alright, so if we have the key down, if I press and hold the key, that's going to be one event. If I let the key go, if I release it, if we just simply tap a key, that's also a different type. If we do the Alt key plus another key on the keyboard, so we can do Alt, Control, Shift, we can look for key codes. So if I want to look at the Unicode value for a letter, I can do that kind of thing. So if they press the Unicode value for 0012 on the keyboard, therefore it will do something. We can also look at the keys and we can display the key characters. We can actually cause the system to state, hey, you press the A key on the keyboard. Alright, so our forms are going to allow us to use multiple controls. So far we've only been making one event handler per thing. So like our button, we could make it where if you click on it, it does one thing. If you hover over it, it does something else. If you move off of it, it does something else. If you tab to it, it does something. If we change the color of it, if we try to resize it, we actually have these capabilities where we can perform different events depending on what you did to the object, not just simply that you interacted with it. Now what we need to worry about is what's called focus. So the focus is going to be whatever the object that we're on currently. So if I selected a text box, if I'm selected in ready to type text, that box is considered to be in focus. So if I were to tab out of the text box, then that text box would actually lose focus, and we can cause an event to occur. Now this is going to require for us to use our tab stop. So remember, we have to make a tab stop for anything that should allow us to go from one element to the next using the tab key on the keyboard. We have to specify that the tab stop is true, it's valid. We actually want them to be able to go from one thing to the other with the tab key. And then we also have to specify our index. Remember, our index starts at 0 and then goes up from there, and the lower the number, it'll be first in the list. So tab stop 0 is going to be the very first one that it goes to. So as soon as you run your program, it'll automatically be at that tab stop. Alright, so like I said, we can have different events occur on the same object, but we can also cause different objects to generate the same event. So let's say I put 5 buttons on the screen and I want all 5 of those buttons to do the exact same thing. I could, if I wanted to, specify that if I click on button 1, it performs the button 1 click. If I click on button 2, it still performs button 1 click. If I click on button 3, and so forth. So we actually have that kind of capability where multiple things could cause the same event to occur. Our additional controls, we have all these different controls in our toolbox. We have different things that we can play with, and if you click on events, you will see all the different types of events that can occur for each of those types of objects. But if you need more help with them, if you try to perform an event on an object that you don't know how it works, the help utility is available, and then there are also discussion groups online. MSDN is an awesome resource to try to find these different places where you can go to get information about the controls that are available to you. Alright, just to show you how some of these events occur, I'm going to make a basic form with a button, a label, and a text box. So we'll put the label down here, we'll put a text box on it. Okay, so this would be kind of like what we've done before. So I want to show you how this works. I'm going to give each of these names. So this is going to be our text box. Call it TBX input. And this is going to be CMD go. And the default text says something like click me. And then our label here, just wanted to say hello. And so we just have a label here, it's called hello, and then we're going to call it LBL output. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to make it where if I type something into this text box up here and I click me, it will put that text down here where it says hello. Alright, so we're just simply going to state that if you type text here, click here, it puts the text down there. So to make the default click event for this button, I simply double click on it. The object is CMD go and the event is click. So what I want to do is I want to take whatever's in the text box and put it into the label. So I'm going to take LBL output dot text and set that equal to TBX input dot text. Now no conversions, this is just a basic program, and so if I run this and I type in good morning and then click me, there we go, now we have good morning. Now if I click this, it does overwrite it every time. So if I want to put it back to hello, I have to type that again. Now we have hello again. Alright, so now what I want to do is I want to specify that if you even move the mouse over this button, that I want it to still do the same thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the Events tab, and I have options for what I can actually do with this. And you'll notice that we have some mouse enter, mouse hover, mouse leave. And what I can do is I can select any of the available methods that if we perform this particular task, so if the mouse enters it or even if the mouse hovers over it, we're going to make it where it actually performs that task. So now if I run the program and I type good morning and then I hover over click me, I didn't click on it, I just simply hovered over it. So I'm going to type in some numbers and letters, whatever, it doesn't matter. And all I'm doing is hovering. If you notice I'm not clicking, I'm just simply hovering over it. So just by simply entering the area of the text box or hovering over top of it, then we cause something to happen. And so these are just simply allowing different actions to occur, different events to run the same action. So my sender is the button. The events, I have different events, but they're all going to have the same outcome. They all have the same event handler, and in this case, they're all going to replace the text that is in our label. Alright, I want to make it, if you hover the mouse back over the label here, I want it to reset it back to hello. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the label, go to Events, and if the mouse enters that space, what I want to do is I want it to actually reset it. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to name a new method. I'm going to create a new event. And the way that I name it is going to be the name of the object, which is LBL output, underscore what the event is. And the event here is mouse enter. So I'm going to say mouse enter. And when I press enter, it will actually create a new section of code for me with LBL output mouse enter. And so what I want to do is LBL output dot text is equal to hello. Okay, so now what happens is if the mouse enters that area, we'll reset it to hello. Alright, so go ahead and start. I'm going to say good morning. Okay, hover here. I didn't click on it, I just hovered. Okay, but now if I come down here and hover over this, notice I enter the area for the label, it goes hello. So if I go back and forth between these two, it will actually cause them to change. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to you entered the label. Okay, and I want to do something like if I exit the label. Alright, so I'm going to click this. I want to go down to mouse leave. Let's see. Mouse leave right here. I'm going to make a new event. So this is LBL output mouse leave. Okay, so this time it's going to be LBL output dot text is equal to you left the label. Alright, so now start this. Say something like good morning. Click me. Okay, so I clicked it, but I could have just hovered over it. All right, so now I'm going to move the mouse over this. You enter the label, leave, you left, and notice it changes depending on if I leave or enter the label. So depending on which one I hover over or leave or anything like that, it will also dictate what occurs with this. So what I could do is I could make it where, let's say I want it to say something like hover here, and then when you hover over it, then it changes to something else, but then when you leave it, then it goes back to hover here. I could do that kind of thing. So I can make all these as labels that simply don't do anything until you hover over it, but then when you don't hover over it anymore, then it will actually, it'll go back to whatever you wanted it to be before. So I could hide some text here. Maybe I wanted to have things like a memory game. I can make it where if you hover over a card, it flips the card over, but then when you move the mouse away, then it flips the card back over the way that it's supposed to be. I have all sorts of options that I can do depending. But I can make my own event handlers. I just simply have to specify what object it is and what I want it to do, and then I could allow this section of code to be run by any other object, so I could interact with our text. Alright, so I'm going to play with another thing, which is our text box here, and if the text changes, then I want to change the label. Alright, so if you go down through this, you'll see all the options that are available to me. And so I want to do something like text changed. Okay, so if the text changes, I want it to pretend that I clicked on the button. Alright, so watch this. So now I'm going to say something like hello world. Notice what's happening. Notice down here at the bottom is as I typed, which I hovered over it, so this is my text. So notice as I typed that, the label at the bottom is automatically changing to whatever I typed. So it's making it where just by me simply changing the text that's in this, it automatically will do this. Alright, well I didn't want for this one to occur. Let's say I wanted to get rid of it. So the text changed. Oops, didn't mean to do that. What I can do is I can come back and delete this now. Now I can't delete CMD Go because there is still an event out there that's actually going to use it. So our click me button is actually still using it, which means that if I delete this little section of code right here, it will break my program. I cannot delete any of these until I have actually deleted the last one of the events that's actually calling it. So what we can do is all of these different objects that we have different senders, we have different objects. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I want to change this a little bit just so you can see what happens. Alright, so we're going to change this that if you click on it, we're going to change this from CMD Go _ click to, let's call it click 2. Alright, and the reason I'm doing this is just because I have other things that are using the click event. This is not what you would really do in the real world. Alright, so what I want to do is I want to take our label, or LBL output, .text, and what I want to do is I want to state what the sender was and what the event was. And I can actually do that. So it's going to be a string.format. And I want to send in, let's see, our sender. And we're going to put that as 0. And make a new line, and then we're going to do the event. And we'll make this number 1. Now, because I already have this formatted as a string.format, I don't have to do sender.toString. But if I were to try to use this without doing the string.format, I would have to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say sender and then E. So those are the two that we're sending in. But you'll notice, like if I do sender dot, I do have a toString value here, but if I try to do toString, because I'm already doing a string.format, it will actually give an error if I try to do this. Alright, so I'm going to get rid of this dot. Alright, so what I'm going to do is run this, and I'm going to say something like, I clicked the button. Alright, so click me, and you'll notice that what I sent was that we click the button. Notice it says click me as text, and I can't hover over it or else it'll go back to the default value. And then the event is going to be the mouse event args. Now notice that the event was going to be that the system was listening for the mouse to do something. It detected the mouse did something. What did it detect that it did? It detected that it clicked. In this lesson, you learn that you use an event to notify a client program when something happens to a class object. The .NET framework provides the guidelines to follow when you develop a class that others will use. It's already built in. We use the existing control components to contain events. Every mouse or keyboard event handling method must have two parameters. It's going to be who sent it and what was the interaction. So that's why we name it as the object_event. And then when we encounter multiple GUI controls on a form, one of those controls is going to have focus, and depending on which one has focus, that will dictate which event handler occurs based on what is actually happening at that point in time.